everyone. Thank you again for joining us today at FreightPlus for our webinar. We're going to be focused today on client obsession in transportation and how we think that being customer obsessed in the middle market, how it sets up, it makes all the difference, and it sets up both our shippers, FreightPlus, and our carriers for win-win-win situations. My name is Ben Graeff. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at FreightPlus. Been here about 2.5 years. Prior to that, spent 10 years at Amazon with the last 3 in Amazon Transportation Services and Amazon Shipping. And I'm just really excited to talk about our topic today. As FreightPlus, we've been around for 30 plus years in terms of serving clients and customers in the transportation and logistics space. And we were really born out of a customer-centric managed consulting business and built a managed transportation provider focused on the middle market and focused on serving customers and our customers' customers. One little bit of housekeeping for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat as we go along, and then we'll address them directly offline with you after the stream. But with that, I'd love to kick it over to our guest speaker today, Rob Cruz, our VP of Client Success.
Hey, everybody, and thanks, Ben. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody today. And it's a topic that's I'm very passionate about, and something that has been a highlight of my career for the better part of the last 10 years or so. But as Ben mentioned, I did join FreightPlus about 4 months ago in the role of Vice President of Customer Success. I have been in the industry a little over 30 years, so spent a couple early tenures with direct with some LTL carriers, but kind of since that time, I've spent the majority of the time with 3PL, 4PL managed transportation providers. Most recently spent about 8 years with Transplace, which was then purchased by Uber Freight. So excited to be here, excited to talk about this topic, and appreciate everybody joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, and just to briefly cover today's agenda and the objectives of really what we want to cover today, I think first and foremost, it's how a customer obsessed approach creates win-win opportunities across all the stakeholders involved in transportation outcomes and in terms of driving overall business growth. I think the second is really understanding the unique challenges that mid-sized companies face, and because they're very unique in terms of scaling, in terms of the limited number of resources, in terms of the subject matter expertise that's necessary in terms of scaling a logistics operation. And I think lastly, we just want to talk through the benefits of partnering with a managed transportation provider, particularly one that is obsessed with servicing your clients and your customers, and how it makes all the difference. So with that, Rob, why don't we dive in? Do you want to talk about maybe some of the high level challenges that mid-size and growing businesses face that are unique maybe to this cohort of shippers?
Yeah, I'd love to. I kind of started out by understanding that the mid-market customer, to what my experience has been, is that every shipment just means more to that customer. So enterprise clients and those customers that we have that have thousands of shipments a day, more interested in trends and what's going on in the overall numbers. But the mid-market client literally is very, very attached to those shipments and the performance of each and every shipment. So it just means more, which that then in turn means that it's a different approach that we have to take to make sure that we give the level of comfort and service that's needed, so that they feel the attention that they need for each and every shipment. We're generally much closer to those key contacts in the middle market, because of that relationship has to be a little bit deeper. It has to be an understanding that in some cases we're not just meeting once a month to go over reviews. It's a daily process of understanding the flows and ins and outs and ebbs and exceptions within their freight. So that's an exception to what the mid-market kind of looks like from a service standpoint, and something that I feel is kind of a differentiator. Some of the challenges they face on their side, at least in my opinion, sometimes it's just resources. So from a full understanding of what needs to be done in a managed transportation program, a managed transportation provider can come in and provide those resources to fully do all of the execution of tenders and procurement events. We provide that subject matter expertise that maybe they don't have within their walls of really understanding necessarily what the freight market is doing. They need to understand kind of, and it's kind of timely now of what we see and everybody's projecting to kind of happen in the next 6 months to a year, which is an inflationary market. So, what kind of provider you have that is putting the strategy in front of you within your, not only your RFPs, but the execution of those RFPs and where you're going to live in the contract and spot market, and how do you keep attaining the capacity that you need at a reasonable cost when the market is kind of flipping. So I feel like some of the middle market customers don't necessarily have that expertise within their walls, and that's why they hire a managed transportation provider. Some other things in there is
just one other thing before we dive in. I think you talked about limited resources, and I think something that we find quite a bit is that VPs of supply chains or directors of logistics, they are wearing 5, 10, 15 different hats. One day it could be inventory procurement. The next day it could be chasing down a load that went missing. The next day it could be, dealing with some AP stuff with carriers, and I think that that's one of the benefits of what a managed transportation provider does in terms of that subject matter expertise. It's let us worry about the transportation, everything to do with that end to end. So then you can take one of those hats off. So do you want to talk a little bit more about, how we help those like key points of contact to our customers?
Yeah. So the first approach is to really take a co-managed approach to the business. Because in this essence, we understand when business is sold and executed, there's a certain amount of business that has to operate within certain parameters. And in order to do that, we have to understand the limitations of what our customer has, and then understand how we're going to execute to not only, as you mentioned earlier, our customer, but our customers' expectations. So we have to come in with that co-managed approach. We have to really put in additional effort to be closer and knit with those clients. We've got to put a lot more metrics in understanding, hey, this is how we're benchmarking to the market. This is the critical KPIs that we need to work together on. And we can talk about that in a little bit when we get to kind of SLAs, but understanding from our side what we have to execute at what level, and reporting on it, and a clear understanding of the customer's expectations to that. And then also the customer's expectations from our side. So what can they do from their side that can help us achieve our mutual goals within the program? So it's really a co-managed approach.
Yeah, and I think like oftentimes we talk about transportation solutions, but where we've partnered the best with kind of mid to growing companies is really end to end supply chain. So how do we look at under the roof operations? How do we look at order patterns, and when are orders being dropped to the warehouse, and how are we creating lead time that then allows them to procure logistics and freight at a really competitive price? And I think that's where that's part of, again, the challenge of wearing many hats. It's like not really thinking. You're thinking about, hey, can I pick my inventory and can I get it on a pallet and get it on the dock in time for the carrier to pick it up? Let alone thinking about how do we go change our order patterns, maybe with some of these large retailers. But let's talk a little bit about customer concentration risk and the importance of maintaining strong relationships with the Walmarts, the Costcos, the Amazons of the world. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Rob?
Sure. So everybody knows that those are the big box retailers. There's a lot of opportunity for customers to sell those products and into those big box companies, but there's also a lot of risk associated, a lot of cost, and sometimes that can get away from a lot of customers. So what we do and we put in place is the understanding of we have those appointment making abilities within those customers. They have the ability to track towards a must arrive by date, really capturing and digitizing that delivery of information from the customer, of understanding what they've committed to their end customer, and then backing up our solution from there. So in some cases, we've had customers where we've had to, that are working in really niche modes of transportation, such as frozen fish and things into the Costco world, which we do a lot of. And we have to kind of back in because there aren't a lot of providers within that group that kind of go into those, and when they do go into those big box retailers, and Costco in particular, they're generally going on a certain sailing schedule because they're LTL providers and they only have so much in the network that's being delivered in on certain days. So we work backwards with those customers, we co-manage the approach, we bring it back and back into how we're going to service the customer, how we're going to show visibility to the success of the program, and then even also show them how we can help them fight back with opportunities on chargebacks and fines and fees that maybe they didn't have the visibility of the data or the understanding of what's truly a carrier-related failure versus an availability of an appointment or some other default that happened during that ship.
So first, I love the concept of working backwards. So really starting with what is the customer's biggest pain point, working backwards from that pain point in order to develop the program and the solution for them. I think something you also said is like each shipment kind of matters more to mid-size and growing companies. And I think this concept of like customer concentration risk, like we have clients who maybe have 70% of their business with a singular retailer. And so making sure that, again, working backwards from what is that scorecard, what does that SLA look like, and what is necessary for us to be a partner of record or a partner like a preferred partner at those retailers. That's something that we focus a lot on, particularly again because every load into a customer who might be 70-80% of your business is that much more important. But Rob, maybe let's move on because I think we might need to do some education on really what is managed transportation, what is a managed transportation provider, and how is it different than the standard freight broker.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned the term co-managed earlier. That's kind of a big piece of it. So it takes the mentality of saying, hey, we are anybody in the space that is a traditional broker in the world that's just coming in and moving freight at a markup and turns it into a program. So customer success to me is a key part of that program. I don't think a managed transportation provider can exist without having a specific customer success strategy.
Job security.
Yeah, job security on my part, I'll admit, but something that's worked out well for me. So I enjoy the obsession with it. But yeah, so from a managed transport, absolutely, it works into really understanding and being an extension of your customer. So we are, for every one of our customers, an extension of their company. So we are acting on their best behalf. We have an interest in their wallet and understanding and making sure that they are being competitive in the marketplace and proving that they're being competitive in the marketplace. And if they're not for some reason, what the call outs are for those. So it could be certain things associated with extremely low lead time. It could be absolute facilities that are a nightmare to deal with, maybe 3PL warehouses they're operating in that carriers are just not interested in going into, that is driving up their costs. So we bring those actionable insights through either data-driven analytics from our Power BI tools or even through our just continuous improvement process and QBR process of really working through and saying, hey, here are the opportunities. Rate is one thing. RFPs, rate compression, that's table stakes for any broker that's out there. It's the continuous improvement. And what are you going to do after you come in year one and help somebody reduce maybe that wasn't buying well? It's years 2 through 5 through 10 that then become important in saying, hey, how can we make your supply chain extremely efficient, drive out waste, and then become a trusted advisor to that customer?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit on a couple key points there, but I think end-to-end partnership and ownership and really like building a relationship. Our CEO, Steve, talks all the time about building 25 plus year relationships with our employees, with our clients, and with our carriers. And so getting out of that transactional environment, I think, is one major benefit. I think secondly, it's something that we learned, way back when we were consultants. It's owning, by having end-to-end ownership, you're able to own the technical, you're able to own the process and the operation, and you're really able to then own the end-to-end transportation program. And I think what you were talking about was really identifying like structural costs that are in a transportation program and eliminate them. So it's not, you're always, it's a very volatile freight market. The market goes up and down all the time, and we'll get to that. But I think identifying opportunities where we can structurally pull out costs from our customers' transportation program is just something that, unless you really have that end-to-end partnership and ownership that's like co-managed, it's very difficult to do on a transactional basis. But hey, Rob, we've been in kind of unprecedented times in terms of the transportation logistics space, whether it's LTL or truckload. You want to talk a little bit about how, again, that end-to-end relationship and partnership over multiple years, how that can prepare shippers for both up and down markets?
Sure. So, from my standpoint, one thing I'm a big believer in is absolutely from the inception of a customer coming on board, or even during the sales process, is that we get the customer success team completely involved in understanding what we're selling up front, standing it up. That's kind of the walk run, or crawl walk run scenario, the crawling out of the onboarding process, walking with the initial measurements that we want to, and just executing the freight on a day-to-day basis. And then kind of what you're talking about is the run portion of that, which is, hey, okay, how do we take it to the next level? So for instance, in the inflationary market, we're just going through our QBR season now. So we're really calling out exactly where our customers sit. We've had a crazy volatile market. We've had a freight depression for the last year and a half that have driven a ton of capacity out of the marketplace. And with economic indicators starting to make the turn in volumes, and starting to predict an inflationary market, how are we working with our customers to say, okay, now some of these behaviors that you've had for the last couple of years, that you've been able to still secure great pricing within the spot market, even when you had no lead time, or you didn't put certain shipments to get, those freight costs are going to start to climb. And you have to have a partner that has a great playbook that says these are exactly the 4 or 5 things that we're going to do. We're going to identify, we want to understand what your risk level and cost versus service understanding is. So where do you feel comfortable at? How can we change the way we procure freight more frequently, or versus in the last few years when the freight market was dropping versus more longer term, now that the market's going to be inflationary. So how do we lock in those prices? How do we show tender acceptance, and how do we get the relationship with the carriers to commit to us and commit to our customers, so we can continue to show them value?
Yeah, and I think one other sort of benefit of a managed transportation provider is what we always talk about in terms of 3 wide and 3 deep. And so, we don't want to just be working with the director of logistics. Because again, as you're talking about, a market that starts to inflate, rates are going up, then we need to be able to work across the different teams within our shippers. So whether that's sales, or that's customer service, or that's logistics, to understand order patterns, help arm them with data to go back to their customers and say, hey, if you gave me 24 hours better lead time, we could reduce rates by 10%. And again, in a transactional environment, it's a lot harder to do that, because you don't have the sheer volume and understanding of the network. And then 2, you don't have the relationship sort of across the customer. But I think, the title of this webinar is Client Obsession in Transportation, Rob. So let's maybe what is your sort of definition of customers obsession, and why is it significant?
Yeah, to me, it comes down to company and organizations leadership principles. And it's one of our key ones here, is understanding exactly where our customer needs to be. So we kind of mentioned earlier about working backwards, and I mentioned just a little while ago about going up life cycle, or the upstream to the sales cycle, to fully understand what's being brought on from a customer. To me, you have to understand what good looks like to a customer versus what great looks like. Good is what you got to do to basically stand the business up, and great is what you have to be in order to keep the business and to grow and scale. So parts of that, to me, the customer journey with us or with any managed transportation provider, should include that onboarding experience of a full understanding of exactly what's being promised, the solution that's being designed, have customer success and the customer team and everybody else have that obsession of understanding, hey, are we actually developing and providing what the customer wants? Are they telling us, or are we trying to put something together that just puts the Band-Aid on it, and doesn't really accomplish the end goals? And part of that, to me, is a really thorough SOP, or future state of what's going on. So as you get in there, fully understanding how you're going to operate and do business together. So that's kind of the daily journey with a customer. And something that they sign off on and say, hey, this is exactly how we're going to operate. This is exactly the notifications you're going to give me. This is how we expect to work with you, and how we, our customer expects to work with us. And then to me, you mentioned it earlier in SLA. To me, that's kind of the next step of really bridging that gap, is taking that SOP, that expectation, that onboarding, and developing a really thorough service level agreement with our customers that says these are all of the measurements, and they have to be measurable agreements, not just statements that are out there, but something that is measurable on both our sides and our customer, to fully understand what we're being successful at. So we're going to agree to potentially on-time performance. We might agree to critical issue resolution, communication responses from emails, how we're going to benchmark your shipments and costs to the market, how often we're going to meet in the cadence, and how many continuous improvement projects we're going to do. All these things are part of a great SLA and service level agreement. And then we also identify a handful of items that our customer is responsible for. So, for instance, if they're fully not operating and not driving and not utilizing the correct bill of lading consistently, and it's really putting a damper on, or a burden on our freight auditing process to be able to keep up in a timely fashion, we have to be able to call that out. So we spell that out in the SLA from the customer as well. And so these are the things you agree to, such as bill of lading usage, manually created shipments, lead time, all those things that you want to do as goals. And then we get together, we put a scorecard together for both parties, and we meet on it monthly and understand, hey, where are we succeeding at? And that's kind of the first part. But then you have to also update that annually. Those agreements change, those priorities change, those goals change on both sides every year. So it has to be a continuous process of reviewing and renewing. So we're always making sure that we've got that at the top of our mind.
Yeah, I think great summary of what it means to really like codify customer obsession. I think that SLA, those SOPs, it's like the how on the why. But I think something we talk about at a high level with all of our teams, our operations teams, our customer success teams, our technical teams, is we need to obsess over our customers more than they obsess over them. It helps to start working backwards from, okay, they're hearing, our clients are hearing feedback from their transportation provider, about their transportation provider from their end customer. And then how do we work back to make sure that our client is in the best light with their end customers? Because that's really going to be how they grow and scale their business. But with that, Rob, I'd love to maybe some like real life examples of where you've seen, FreightPlus or in your previous life, customer obsession making the difference as it relates to clients.
Sure. I think one great example, you and I were both part of a QBR yesterday at one of our bigger clients, and they're a flour and baking goods distributor. And one of their passions as a corporation was sustainability. And we identified that kind of early on a couple of years ago, that was a key initiative for them. So we did some things initially, from being SmartWay certified and providing, using more carriers that are SmartWay certified. So things that achieve those intermodal conversions, so putting in some sustainability dashboards to show how much metric tons of CO2 you can take out by the optimization we're doing, or the modal conversions. But then we took it one step further and then really stopped and thought, what else can we do that maybe is outside of the box and not of those traditional transportation provider scenarios. And we started researching alternative fuel providers from a carrier standpoint. So we spent a good 7 months, I think, really looking at the opportunity, looking at the customer's network, figuring out, we identified that those public providers were pretty much dedicated to certain groups. There wasn't really a lot of flexibility and availability in with that, so we looked at a dedicated solution, and we're providing a pilot based on that with a great partner that is not only providing that, but also going to provide savings to the customer, which sometimes it's difficult to do in both. So to us, that was a huge win. It was an absolute priority for that organization, and we were able to not only kind of expand on some of that. So that's one example I have. You kind of mentioned customer's customer. We have one of the largest envelope manufacturers and distributors in the country that's a client of ours, and they have a very critical customer. And we had to kind of identify what portion of their business was associated with to going to this customer, set up an entirely separate tracking, tracing, and reporting process for this customer and the way we handle and attack it. So it went all the way back from how we're procuring those, the lead time, how we're tracking, how many additional tracking calls that we need even before pickup for visibility. Where, in traditional standpoint, from a macro point or P44 4 kites, you're generally getting those tracking updates maybe when somebody gets there. We're bringing it in and doing that the piece, even if it's manually, of getting the update of where that truck's at hours before, to pre-plan and understand and then give hourly updates on that. And then providing a whole separate reporting to the entire organization on the success of that program, which has been extremely well received. So that's a couple. We already kind of talked about the Costco piece and the frozen food. That'd be another example I have of really working backwards and some of the.
Yeah, I think the second example that you talked about is, I think another thing that we talked to our organization about. Everyone has, like, technology is table stakes nowadays, but we want to be tech enabled, not tech dependent. And so by being agile from a technical perspective, and again, working backwards from what the client needs, it would have been very easy for us to say MacroPoint pings every time it passes a geofence. Like, that's the service we can offer, versus, let's layer MacroPoint, then let's layer humans on top of that with the right audit mechanisms to ensure that really, best in class service, again, for that our customer's customer. But so, kind of talking on the technology bent, Rob, can you talk about, the role that technology plays and how that overlays or interplays with exceptional service?
Sure. I've always been one that says, and coming from some of my background and some of the big providers, that the technology absolutely sells. It sells to the C-suite, sells to the executives. It looks great. You have to, as you mentioned, have table stakes to do some of those things. But technology sells, but to me, service keeps the business. So how are you going to keep the business year on year? A lot of that technology, especially in the middle market, is either not able to be capitalized on, either by a lack of resources or technology at those customer levels. So they don't have the ability to really capture SKU level data back forth, everything we need to do to really get it, or maybe even pass to us to be able to accomplish some things. And you mentioned the tracking as well. Tracking is only as good as the provider that's bringing it, and and there's still a lot of human elements involved.
Yeah, that's right.
So to me, a lot of the bells and whistles that are being sold, when you get into a lot of the APIs and AIs, are less important to a customer obsessed middle market managed transportation customer or company, because we're dealing with those people who are literally wanting to pick up the phone and say, hey, I have a shipment that didn't make it. What are you going to do about it? And that's where we live and breathe day to day.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk a lot about, like, how do we meet our customers where they want to be? Like we were talking about earlier about the multiple hats that our different providers are wearing on a given day. Like, you could have a logistics manager who's on the dock and doesn't even have, may not even have a laptop or a desktop at their fingertips. So email, text, phone is going to be their like preferred communication method. And so that's where a managed transportation provider, it's like, if that's customer obsessed, let's meet that person on the dock, and then use the technology and the automation in the back end to ensure that, we can continue to cost effectively serve the client, but then also have a really, really strong level of service. So I think that's something that, the tech enables us to then go and meet the client where they need to be. And then, something we also talk about, we're a mid-sized growing company as well as a managed transportation provider. And, we're not going to be able to beat your old employer or my old employer from a technical standpoint, Amazon or Uber. But what we can do with our people is win on effort, service, and trust. And so that's a lot of the technology that we've been building, is how do we create those safety nets, those audit mechanisms to ensure that the service is there, that the rate competitiveness is there, and in the end that we're delivering an exceptional service for our customers. Anything else to add there, Rob, on the tech side? Otherwise, we'll get into your meat and potatoes with the client success and client management.
No, not really. I mean, I would add, when you kind of talk about it, to me, that's the customer experience. Any customer success oriented company is going to have that. So that's a key priority on our end when we kind of talk about how we're going to set up is really understanding the customer experience. And, how do we do that? We talked a little bit, of the SOPs and the SLAs, but really have to get into also the QBRs. So to me, a QBR is it should be 75% forward facing, of looking at opportunities in today's world. And we're digitizing all of the data. We're showing our insights through our BI tools. Those are being delivered or worked in, on real time with our customer base, so they understand what their cost per pound is. They understand the length of haul. They understand how many claims they have. So we've really structured a QBR process here that is really understanding of what our customer is experiencing first. So we want to understand what's going on in their business, so we can be first and foremost understanding what we need to do coming up, and then working through how we've accomplished together with our customers what we have. Look at those metrics, absolutely, but also look at those SLA scorecards, understand exactly how we're performing, and then come out of a QBR with a really robust group of priorities for continuous improvement and action items that's going to take us through to the next QBR, and then we can go back and prioritize and make sure that we get all of those opportunities taken care of and sewed up. So to me, that's kind of the meat of it. You set up the process, you set up the SOPs, the SLAs, you get the understandings, you get an obsession with the team, continuous improvement. You have to have a culture of continuous improvement here, which is what we're installing and we're experiencing now. And then taking that QBR process and this weekly and monthly cadence with our sponsors and our even the folks you mentioned earlier, meeting where they're at. It could be on the plant levels of understanding how we're performing, what we can do better. So to me, that's the key of being obsessed. Not, hey, we're managed transfer, we know what's going on, we know what's best for you, and we're just you got to do this. It's really has to be a collaborative approach.
Yeah, I think like 90% of success in business and in life is doing what you said you were going to do by when you said you were going to do it. And I think two other foundations that we talk about is responsiveness and accountability. And so that's really what the SLA, the SOPs. It's like, let's start with what is our responsiveness benchmark, how we then are going to hold ourselves accountable to that, and then let's revisit it frequently. And something that I love that you ask all of our clients in our QBRs is, are we doing what you asked us to do? Are we doing what you're paying us to do? And then what is your level of satisfaction? Because I think that maybe talk about why you asked that question to our clients.
Yeah, because to me, you get in a structured QBR and you're talking about initiatives, and sometimes you don't step back and look at the bigger picture. And to me, the bigger picture is understanding from everybody in the room, not just your key sponsor. And that's, we had a good audience yesterday. We had 7 or 8 people in there, and everybody had a little bit different answer of what we could be doing better. And then, we want those answers, and that's what we told them. We don't ask the questions just to hear, hey, you guys are doing a great job. And they all gave different small things that mean something to them in their business. Some as simple as, hey, can you add this to the subject line in your email when you're sending this thing, so we have an easier way of identifying where we're looking for. Or can you look into some additional opportunities in some of the alternative fuels and give us some more data behind that? So those are all things that I'm very passionate about, of understanding truly, and I truly mean it when I ask the customers, how are we doing? Are we doing what you brought us on to do? And then understanding what can we do better, because if we don't ask that, we're going to be sitting there wondering why in a couple of years that behind the scenes we didn't accomplish what we could.
So I think, again, as we talk about the accountability aspect of, like, what does it mean to how do you stay accountable to customer obsession in the transportation industry? And you mentioned the term SLAs quite a bit today. Can you just quickly give the audience an overview of what is an SLA, and then why do they matter so much to you and to FreightPlus?
Sure. To me, you kind of mentioned the words responsive and accountable. To me, that's a key portion of this on both sides. So without identifying goes back to understanding what looks like for our customers. So these agreements should be something that that we've identified. They're all going to be customized. We have a great template here and a great piece of starting point. Everyone's going to be different for every customer we have because different measurements are different. Different things are very levels of importance for our customers. So to me, it's very very important on an onboarding, and especially as you walk out of the gates with a customer, to understand what their expectations are for you as an organization. It kind of goes back to that question I asked: are we doing what you expected us to do? We should know through the SLA process if we're not doing what they expect us to do, and if we're not delivering on it. So to me, structured piece, the review part of it is extremely critical, because those are going to change. Our customers' needs are going to change. We didn't mention it earlier, but things can happen, such as mergers and acquisitions. It's happened a lot in the last couple of years, especially with middle market clients being either acquired or merging with other organizations, and having those agreements and everything to be able to scale and help our customers scale as they either buy other companies or smaller organizations that we can put in the same sort of agreements, and a great structure to start with is key.
Yeah, I think again, back to the responsiveness and the accountability piece, it helps to keep everyone on the same sheet of music. And then what we find is by clearly defining those expectations with our clients, they then can go tell the story internally, whether that's to a board or that's to a private equity firm that's just acquired them. They have their scorecard, they have their expectations set. They can say where it's kind of like a SWOT analysis, but with metrics. That again, we live and breathe every day with our clients. So Rob, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to leave with the audience in terms of customer obsession and the importance of customer obsession in managed transportation in the middle market?
Well, I mentioned the culture of continuous improvement. To me, it's very clear to have, and we've deployed a continuous improvement tracker here to really understand all the things that we've brought to the table, the customers asked us to do, really track those projects, put them in parking lots when we're not able to accomplish something, but really have a great backwards view of the partnership since inception to understand everything that we've done together as a group. And then continuing to put that together. So that's something we've imparted that we hadn't touched on here yet. Is that CI tracker as a key part of that. But overall, customer obsession. I mentioned customer success is a passion for me. I think it's key for any growing company on both sides. As Ben mentioned, we're a mid-sized growing company ourselves. We feel like that's key in the market that we're in to service that. And we're excited to sit here and talk to everybody today.
Yeah, awesome. Just to quickly summarize what we discussed today, the importance of a managed transportation provider in the middle market. Really, I think we didn't really talk through like the marginal cost of scaling, but I think we're built for scale, and so as each incremental load increases, we don't necessarily need to increase our operational expense, and our clients might have to. And so I think the benefits of using a managed transportation provider when you have limited resources, maybe limited subject matter expertise, or having to wear multiple hats. I think the importance of really meeting customers where they are and where they want to be, and how tech enables that. But we're not dependent on it. And then I think lastly, like obsessing over customers and obsessing over customers is never going to be a bad business strategy, I think, for us or for our clients.
Absolutely.
But just wanted to thank all of our participants today. Rob and I are active on LinkedIn. I think our email addresses were shared during the presentation. So feel free to shoot us a note either on LinkedIn or on our website or over email. And then if you want, there's a QR code on the screen right now. It's a quick survey on how we did, what we can do better, maybe some topics that you might be interested in hearing about in the future. But with that, thank you all, and thank you, Rob.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.